It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality Live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.
Hello and welcome back to the Non-Profits, the show where we discuss news and topics of the day from a skeptical humanist perspective. My name is Richard Gilliver, and today I am joined by my amazing friends, Kelley Laughlin. How are you doing, sir?
You called me sir. That's hysterical. I'm doing great, and I'm really happy to be here with what a great, wonderful panel of people. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great show.
It certainly is, and the always wonderful Cynthia McDonald.
Hey, Richard. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm very excited for this. How are you?
I am doing well. Not too a week back from my Texas tour, so I'm ready to go ahead and get into some non-profiting.
Good. And our very, very, very special guest, Jason Friedman. How are you?
Hey, Richard, how's it going? I'm real happy to be here. I don't know how I ended up here. I walked in my room and there was a microphone sitting here and I saw people on the screen. I'm like, I guess I'm doing this tonight. So I'm excited to be here.
That's how we get you.
That's how you got me. Oh gosh. What's this? So thank you.
That's how we recruit. We just hide microphones in people's houses. Okay, we're very, very happy to have you and really looking forward to what you've got to say. This show is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 50c3 non-profit organization dedicated to promoting atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Today, we're going to talk about humanistic psychology, secular British Columbia on the rise, humanist women of colour gathering, and Bigfoot spotted by an eagle's nest camera, allegedly. As with all of our shows, links to today's topics and the news we discuss are available in the description below. And a reminder that if you want to come into the show prepared, you can check out the Non-Profits Facebook fan page every Friday night for a list of the articles ahead of time. So our first article, we're going to have our very good guest, Jason, leading us in. Take it away, sir.
Thanks, Richard. I appreciate it. Now, this article is on simplypsychology.org, and it's called The Humanistic Approach. Saul McLeod wrote it, and it was updated in 2020. Now, what they're talking about is what they're calling humanistic psychology. Now, humanistic psychology is a perspective that emphasizes looking at the whole person and the uniqueness of each individual. Humanistic psychology begins with the existential assumptions that people have free will and are motivated to achieve their potential and self-actualize. Now, they go on to explain that the humanistic approach in psychology developed as a rebellion against what some psychologists saw as limitations of the behaviorist and the psychodynamic psychology approach that was so popular in the 60s and early 70s. Now, I would love to hear Cynthia's view on this because we did talk about it a little bit prior to the show. And if you would, Cynthia, I would love to hear what you have to say.
Yes, I have things to say because I wrote them down.
Good.
About humanistic psychology. When I first was reading like the articles about this subject, it seemed pretty interesting because it was a divergence of like the traditional psychology. Now, working in a social service area, and I often am referring people to therapy, and oftentimes they are taking advantage of like talk therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, things of that nature. And I know that like for our particular organization, we take like we call it a harm reduction approach when it comes to healthcare, including like when we are doing or doling out therapy. So I've kind of thought when I first got exposed to this whole thing that this is what they were dealing with, and how they were actually doing like non-traditional methods when it comes to engaging a person, when it comes to, you know, trying to evaluate them psychologically. However, one of my issues that I have specifically with this is that it's a divergence from the scientific method when we are talking about actually diagnosing the patient. Matter of fact, I believe that that's one of the things that I wrote in my notes concerning this whole thing. Like, if you are not using, you know, traditional um, scientific methods, rather, in order for you to come to a conclusion when you are dealing with a patient, how are you going to accurately diagnose a person?
Yeah.
Now, it's kind of weird, only because like psychology in of itself does not follow like a specific pattern when it comes to the scientists like chemistry, biology, physics, etc. Right? The mind is still very much so a mystery to us as human beings, right? Even though that we've learned a lot about the brain, but we are still having a lot of different discourses and debates, even when it comes to like how the mind functions, consciousness, what makes a person sentient, and then how do, and even in those particular cases, using that and then seeing like how different behavioral health issues may develop in a person. But and keeping all that in mind, then we have to consider like we may have to come with a different approach when it comes to like diagnoses, or even how we're mapping all these different things when it comes to behavioral health in of itself. So we're going to probably have to come with different philosophies on how to approach this. But there's still a scientific method that any scientist community would utilize in order for us to come to proper conclusions, and this one kind of diverges from that, and that kind of is a red flag to me. But I want to have Jason, I'm not Jason, you already entered this whole discourse for us. I meant Kelley. I would love for you to chime in and get like your thoughts of what you thought about this whole subject.
You know, honestly, my one big problem that I had with this whole idea of humanistic psychology was the reliance that it had on the idea that everyone strives for self-actualization.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know that that's true, right? For one, a lot of people don't have the ability to strive for self-actualization. And if you actually read what they recommend to be able to do this self-actualize, it all sounds really akin to woo to me. It sounds a lot like the people who come into my rock shop to buy healing crystals. It's almost the exact same language. And it's sort of like they're trying to put this scientific face on bullshit to me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just totally what it looks like to me, is bullshit.
Mm.
So I'm and as you mentioned, they kind of like threw away the scientific method too. So I'm just kind of puzzled by the whole thing. That is this really even a science? Is this, can you really call this psychology, or is it just, like I say, is it just BS? You know,
Mhm.
I didn't. One of the things is that I know a lot of it was based on the work of Maslow, and I went back and I read some of his stuff, and he had some really good ideas. And it seems like even he had some really goofy stuff that led into this too. But it seems like even a lot of his good ideas were kind of warped more into this new age. I don't even know what to call it. I don't want to use the word bullshit again, but it's the only one that keeps coming
it does.
to mind.
Well,
Right?
let's call it new age psychology. How about that? Does that
Yeah,
work?
it's
Maybe.
No,
I don't know.
no.
No.
Or-
Okay.
No.
Sorry. I'll just throw that out.
That's like
Yeah,
creation science, you know. I
Ah!
mean, that's
Okay.
come on.
Gotcha.
there are some red flags in there. I think
Yeah.
I struggle not with calling this bullshit, but I'd struggle with the argument around psychology, because there are a lot of people who think that they are proper scientists,
Mm-hmm.
who dismiss psychology and many social sciences out of hand because they don't consider them proper science. And this only, I think, exasperates that. And the many red flags, as both Cynthia and Kelley touched on. I made a list of some of them, and I might repeat what a couple of you have already said here, but it assumes that people have free will. And that's a conversation in itself. It assumes that people are basically good. I saw nothing in the article that showed how they were assessing that statement. It just seemed to be an assertion. People, as Kelley said, are motivated to self-actualize, which it was described as psychological growth, fulfillment, and satisfaction in life, which again is incredibly vague. The subjective, conscious experience is most important. And the focus on psychology is how individuals interpret events. Now, that sounds to me like it could lead to unhealthy or bad ideas being promoted, just because the individual feels good with them. And finally, again, as has already been mentioned, it rejects scientific methodology, and it asserts that the best way to understand people is to talk with them and understand their feelings. Now, all of those things are red flags there, Cynthia.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, when you were talking about specifically the, how are we actually coming to these conclusions, right? Especially like when you're using this methodology of psychology. First off, you mentioned it already, and I think that I also said it too, is that there is already a debate about psychology in of itself being a real science. I believe that, like, one of the articles that I kind of pulled when I was doing like some additional research was from the American psychologist reviewing an issue within the field that has marred its reputation about psychology in of itself. That the author suggests that the field needs a complete cultural change if it wants to be called science, right?
Yes.
And one of the things, and another thing that I forgot to mention, and I think that this kind of goes around with the list that you were giving, Richard, is that humanistic psychology in of itself, when it's gathering data, is qualitative, is not quantitative.
Yep.
So what is qualitative? It's qualitative data is defined as non-numerical data such as text, video, photographs, or audio recordings, and this type of data can be collected using diary accounts or in-depth interviews and analyzed using grounded theory in thematic analysis. Now, okay, there are some ways that you can utilize psychology and use quantitative data. Okay.
Oh, there's a lot.
Oh yeah, tons. But like when you're just using just qualitative data or alone in order for you to draw conclusions, you're going to have problems. And I believe that the main issue that you're going to have with this is that when you are using qualitative research, depending on who the researcher is, oftentimes they imbue their own perceptions and biases when they're gathering data. And especially on the outgroups that they're gathering data on. This has been an issue even before we even came up with humanistic psychology in the first place, when you're talking about behaviorism and some of the other, like, weird ways. Like specifically, like when I remember studying psychology, when I was in college, when we were like looking at Freud and like how he came up with some of like his particular aspects of psychology in itself. Some of it was quite nebulous. I really also believe that some of it was very much so influenced on his use of cocaine, but that's neither here nor there. Going back to what I was saying before, So we're still going to have like this whole particular issue when it comes to like, gathering data that could possibly be non-biased in order for you to draw conclusions. And I don't necessarily think the qualitative data always is going to lead you into that. Jason, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is something that I took a humanistic positive psychology course about 2 semesters ago, and I was in an argument for about 4.5 months with my professor.
Oh,
The things that really, I've been doing great because I'm currently finishing up my Bachelor of Science in psychology with a focus on the biological psychology, developmental psychology, abnormal psychology, the science aspects of psychology, and how behavior is related with brain development and so on and so forth. The thing that really irks me about this, there's 2 things that y'all stole all the great stuff. So the 2 things y'all didn't highlight on that really stand out. One, they dismiss animal research and say what you will about animal research. That is ignorant and that is destructive, because a hypothalamus is a hypothalamus on a primate. It's a hypothalamus. You're this, you're that, whatever your brain structure, your prefrontal cortex. If you put a lesion on this happens. If you put a lesion on this happens. We see behavior changes. We see physical changes, the inability to lift your arm up, but you can lift it out, the inability to do this. And we see those same, if we damage a lesion, if we put a lesion on a primate's brain, and then we study that and compare it to lesions on a human's brain, you're going to see the same thing happening. Same thing happening with rats. Same thing happening with other animals. So to dismiss that is foolhardy and dangerous. And then the second thing that really stands out to me is this is a very racist, ethnocentric philosophy, because the idea of self-actualizing is a primarily Western individualistic cultural idea. It is something that has been pushed on us, that we individualize. If again, okay, so some psychological metrics. I wish my books are over in the other room. I wish I had them. But if you study,
just pull them out of your head, Jason.
I will, because I love this, because I argued with my teacher about this for months. And my partner remembers it was the first time I got a C in a psychology class. It makes me so mad. So if you study development and ideas of identity and self between collectivistic cultures versus individualistic cultures, collectivistic being primarily traditionally Eastern, and then and individualistic being USA. Yeah, I'm me, I'm an army of one, blah, blah, blah. The idea of self and self involvement and self identity takes longer to develop in a collectivistic culture, because you're not so obsessed with self. The group, there's an understanding of the group is number one. You're there to benefit everybody, your family. You're in debt to your family. The idea of self-actualization, like Richard and everybody else hit upon, what is that? How do you measure that? I can see what happens to my brain. I can see my temperament, which we see as a biological thing. I can see my environment. I can see my psychology, my biology. If I'm injured, if we put all these things together, and that's that nice little epigenetic pinball machine, and so what they're doing is, to me, it feels like they're spitting in the face of facts. They're doing some of that woo that Kelley talked about. Cynthia and Richard both hit upon the discarding of the scientific method. I mean, at that moment, and at the moment somebody says that, my ears turn off and I'm done.
Kelley.
Yeah, the throwing away the scientific method really bothered me, and they're relying on journal entries and personal stories. And this is anecdotal evidence. This is exactly what science rejects as evidence, right? So I don't, and like as you mentioned, psychology is already on a weak foot with a lot of the hard sciences and the people who follow them. I think psychology is fascinating, and I'm a geologist, so I'm one of those hard scientists, but I accept psychology as a science, and I find it really fascinating. But I understand and know people who feel just the opposite, who don't think it is. So when you add something like this into it, it's just making it worse, right? Yeah. It's that whole idea. And I hate to see that happen, because I really do think psychology can be could be useful. But when you're doing this stuff, you're just turning it into New Age dribble. I always say New Age is one word, so it rhymes with sewage. New Age.
Yeah, I think one thing we've not mentioned yet so far is that we should, and I don't know if anybody has, but I think it's very easy to confuse humanistic psychology with humanism. And they are not the same things. I'm going to pass this on over to Jason because I can see him chomping at the bit to get at this one.
I brought this up earlier on, and that's what really irks me, because to me, being a humanist is being a skeptic, is using logic, reason, adhering, just being concerned about increasing well-being and decreasing suffering. The more bullshit, the more wooey, subjective, this is just how I feel. The more we do that, the more we cause harm. We see religions causing harm who do that very thing. We see ideologies, like especially here in Texas, causing harm that do that same thing. We see hatred of queer people. We see hatred of women. We see hatred of minorities, all these slurs that people throw around based on this is how I feel. And this is what makes me feel good. And this is no. It's to be a humanist is to seek truth and to increase well-being. And if something is not verifiable and not falsifiable, we must necessarily dismiss it, because at that point you're operating with fucking faith. And faith is not a reliable pathway to truth. And we can fuck a lot of stuff up relying on faith.
Oh, trust. If somebody quotes to me a Hebrews 1:11, 11:1 one more time, I swear I will stab myself in the right eye on camera. Trust. Blood in the whole socket.
Don't do that.
Will just come out. Now, faith. No, don't you dare. You better not do it. Don't do it. But, like piggybacking on what Jason said specifically about humanism, it is also about bettering humans.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about promoting well-being. I know that all of us here, non-believers, have wrestled with the question from a theist: where do you get your morals from?
Mm-hmm.
And my main thing is, I don't have a fund to bail me out if I decide to just kick the shit out of you. So it is in my best interest not to do you harm. And I don't necessarily, and that's not going to really help us as a community of human beings to be able to move forward if we're constantly doing harm to one another. It's not a thing that's going to really help us. So why engage in it? And I mean, like, and also too, like that whole like exerting energy, especially not in exercising, does not help in any shape, way, or form. So why engage in it? It's silly. Don't do that shit. I encourage people, please don't harm other people. Don't beat them up. It's no point. Quit that shit. And in this particular area, I think that like, I don't necessarily want to completely dismiss humanistic psychology. I think that there are some points, especially like as asking open-ended questions to people, like if they're in therapy sessions, in order for them to open up so that you can kind of garner some information specifically from them. I think it's a good idea. I know that like following a script all the time when you are dealing with other people is not always going to be helpful, especially like when you're trying to get to the root of the issue that's going with them. So I don't want to necessarily completely throw everything out, like the baby with the bathwater, right? But it still has a lot of weaknesses to it. And I know this will be my final thought. Just it's the subjective concepts. It's difficult to test. As you all mentioned before, Jason, you mentioned specifically, human and animal behavior not necessarily being able to be compared, especially when we are all animals. And there's definitely, certain behaviors that animals actually do exhibit,
Mhm.
especially if they're getting injured in the brain, that we can actually utilize. And also, like, I hear that whole thing, especially with the self-actualization, where it could be considered racist,
Oh yeah.
especially totally racist. I mean, which there's been tons of data that has been pulled, especially when we're talking about this whole thing about meritocracy. I hear a lot of times, oh, America is a meritocracy. No, it is not. It is not.
No.
It's going to, if you are in the environment where it's going to garner for you to do better, you will. But
Mhm.
if you're in an environment where where there's different issues that's going to be stacked against you, it's going to be harder for you
Mhm.
to self-actualize. And then let's also even think about this. What the fuck does self-actualization mean? It's going to be very different depending on the individual itself. Because self-actualization means, for me, is I got up, took a shower, and brushed my teeth. I self-actualize all the fucking day. For somebody else, it's going to be, I just crushed the stock market. So a lot of that stuff is very subjective, very point to perception, not necessarily something that's rooted in objectivity, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna just touch on one quick thing that you said, and then I'm going to give it to Jason to lead us out. I think there are some good elements to this, and I don't think the good elements to this are the problem with it. I think the major problem with this for me is the complete rejection of the things they don't
Mhm.
agree with, and that's the problem with this. There are some good ideas within it, and if those are promoted alongside scientific methodology and other forms of psychology, it would make a really good system. But they don't. They completely reject everything else, and for me, that is my
Oh
main
yeah.
bugbear with this. Jason, would you like to take us out, sir?
Yeah, I just wanted to hit on self-actualization real quick. In my off semester, I have gotten into the deep dark world of criminal psychology and
Mm.
been obsessing over serial killers. And what a lot of these guys talk about is oh, I found me. I self-actualized. I found myself. I feel
Mm.
so good about this now because now I know what I was meant for. So, just leave it at that. If those guys are self-actualizing and I'm self-actualizing, what's the metric at that point? And we don't want them to self-actualize. So maybe they shouldn't go under this method, if they're trying to get treatment.
That part.
Yeah, that. This is an interesting topic, and I'm sure all four of us could talk about it all day. We spent a great deal of time talking it behind the scenes before we even started.
Mhm.
So we'll leave it there for today. It's something I'd love to come back to in future. In the meantime, thank you to our veteran and new viewers for getting us over 11,000 subscribers. So if you are watching us now and haven't subscribed yet, go and do it, please. Once you've subscribed, do the whole like and ringing the bell things. You all know the old YouTube chatter now. So everybody wants a new non-profit episode, and the new non-profits episode every Sunday at 3 p.m. Central Time.
Mhm.
And let me tell you, and I will never, ever, ever get tired of saying this, that is the only show on a Sunday at 3 p.m. Central that is worth watching. And I am never going to stop saying that. So share your link, get your friends, family members, everybody, your priests, especially your religious leaders, your friends who have religious leaders, your religious friends, get them watching the show. Let's get a wider audience and let's get everybody involved in this conversation. And let's get the word out so we can help starting with the fundraisers. And are you aware that the atheist community of Austin has another YouTube channel? You should be. Check out the Atheist Experience Network, a channel where you can find all the ACA shows in podcast form. Subscribe at tiny.cc/AEN podcast to listen to episodes of The Non-Profits, The Atheist Experience, Secular Sexuality, and all of our other fantastic ATA shows so you don't miss an episode. So our second article comes from CBC News Canada and was published on October 30th, 2022 by Josh Grant. The article tells us that census data has shown that British Columbia is the most secular province in Canada. This comes from Statistics Canada that carries out a census every 10 years and asks Canadians whether they belong to a religious organisation or group. We get balanced viewpoints in this article from the likes of Ian Bushfield, Executive Director of British Columbia Humanist Association, Reverend Carmen Lansdowne, the moderator of the United Church of Canada, and Father Douglas Fenton, Executive Archdeacon of the Anglican Diocese of New Westminster. I've got a feeling that I'm going to disagree with some of you on this. So I'm going to pass it on over to Kelley so he can kick us off.
Okay. First off, I love it when you get good news to report, right? That's the and then there's a quote in the article from I was expecting Cynthia to go first, and she had the guy's full name, but his last name was Bushfield, and it kind of just jumped out to me. It was, BC has always been a bit of a different place. Now, I'm older, and I think people my age realize that it was a bit different when Cheech and Chong came from there. So, but over 52% of the people, that's freaking awesome. And it goes to show that in battles of critical thinking, we can win. And I just feel so awesome about this. I do think that a lot of it is generational. You know, I stopped believing after my parents were divorced when I was in my early teens, and my mother stopped forcing me to go to church on Sunday after that. But I have 2 kids, and even though I educated them, I discussed lots of different religions with them, I exposed them to religion. We even went to different churches because I didn't want them to just follow in my footsteps because, right? And they both turned out to be atheists. So if each generation does that, you know, by doing that, I increased the atheists in my household by 150%, right? So just doing that is winning the battle for us, I think. And it's Ian Bushfield. Thank you, Cynthia. But I'd like to hear what Jason has to say about it.
Well, you know, what really stands out to me are the responses that the Father Douglas Fenton gave. He was the executive archdeacon of the Anglican Diocese in New Westminster. He gave, it seemed like he was kind of dancing around it. What did he say? He says, when we talk about who's religious and who's not, we are often measuring attendance at a place, a church or a mosque or a temple. He went on to say, and not talking about the relationship that faith plays with an individual's life. I feel like that it's kind of a smokescreen and a way to play with the data to confirm his biases. Because he goes on stating faith communities in BC are still very engaged in important issues like housing, homelessness, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples and climate change, while offering important services such as shelters and food banks. The church's role here is no less diminished than it is anywhere else. And that's why I think those numbers sometimes play a different role than they should. To me, it just seems like he's trying to alleviate his dissonance. That's, and that's what really stands out. It's like he's seeing, like what Kelley was saying, there's skepticism, criticism, reasonable thought is starting to purge people of at least that like adherence. And what really stood out to me is that as that Christian dominance is starting to wane, we're starting to see other religions get a little bit of a foothold. You don't have people so nervous being Islamic. You don't have so many people nervous about getting any type of Christian backlash. Now, I live in Texas, so, you know, it's probably a little different than British Columbia. You know, I mean, with our elections and everything, we're very interesting this year. So British Columbia has a little more rights than we have out here when it comes to certain things. So I would understand that it's probably easier for them maybe to make this shift. But I think it's a positive thing. I'm really interested in what Cynthia has to say about this. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but if you would, please tell me how you feel.
Certainly, I will. First off, Texas is its own thing. Being in Texas,
I'm sorry.
No, it's one thing. Like we had so many different shows where we talked about Texas in of itself, especially like with some of the legislation that came down specifically that was from Texas, and being there is a whole different thing. My goodness, Texas is like its own patriotism in its state, to the point where it looks like the inhabitants of itself looks at itself as they are their own country,
Oh, of
which is,
course.
yes, it's so interesting. I'm proud, instead of saying like I'm proud to be an American, I'm proud to
No.
be a Texan.
Oh yeah. Why
You
would you
know,
be proud to be an American?
yeah, no,
If you're a
you
Texan.
can't. Right, if you can't be proud to be an American unless you're a Texan. I mean, I felt so pressured. I had to buy a 10-gallon hat. I bought two, but regardless of that, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, British Columbia, great. So I think it's like, pretty interesting, like especially since like a lot of our ACA hosts are like coming from Canada right now, especially from BC. So like shout out to y'all. But one of the things that I kind of like remarked when I was reading the articles about this particular research is that it's pretty much on trend of some of the things that we were discussing in past shows. So, like specifically in the United States, we are sitting, according to Pew Research, at 29% in 2021 of people who would consider themselves irreligious or non-religious. Okay. Which is the largest trending group that is actually becoming larger and larger year after year. So it makes sense to me that especially like, and I was actually having this conversation with a friend of mine when we were talking about like Texas has its own particular values of patriotism according to their state. Canada has their values as a country of itself, and some of the different things that they have communicated to their constituents is that Canada is fairly nice. Canada is a place where we're kind of like, kind to one another. Canada is, we don't necessarily want to step on each other's toes. And in some cases, Canada also espouses that they have like a larger scale of skepticism, maybe than, some of the rest of the Americas, which, sure, let's go with that. But, so when I was just thinking about that, along with Canada's, perceived values or propagated values, I can definitely see like this region actually becoming more and more secular per se, especially like when you're talking about, I think that the article like mentioned, according to the 2021 population census, 34% of people in Canada claim to be non-religious. While in BC, that number jumped to 52.4%, as Kelley mentioned, the highest it's ever been. And I was even thinking about like when we even reported in past shows about how people who are saying that they don't believe in God in America alone has like jumped from 11% in a 10-year space to like now like 81% are theists rather than like over 91%, right?
Yeah.
So I think that as we are going along, and especially like as we are as a human race, like, encompassing the human race, are learning more about how our environment works, and especially how things are pointing towards a nature explanation versus a supernatural explanation. It kind of, dials us back to actually saying that, oh, it must be God. Especially like every time that we actually got more information about something, we found out, yeah, it wasn't God. Yeah, it wasn't God.
Of course.
But Richard, I'm curious to know. I don't know if you actually got a chance. What did you think about some of the things that the perspective of Dr. Carmen Landon said, who is the moderator for the United Church? I was wondering, did you have a perspective on that?
I think it was interesting in all from all the aspects. I think it was a fairly balanced article in that it gave different people a voice to speak with. I'm not sure I've got an opinion particularly in what she said from her perspective, my concern with the article, I had two concerns with this article. The first one was that it didn't make clear what secularism was. From the outset, it said both it refers to secularism as both without religious affiliation and the view that you can still be secular and hold on to your religious belief, which is what Carmen was saying. And it didn't give a clear distinction on what secularism was, and that confused me from the beginning of the article. But I think, and I don't know whether this is my geographical location, and I think this is where I might disagree with all three of you quite a bit, is that from purely the aspect of coming out of religion, I don't think that's necessarily something on its own to be celebrated. And that's because where I'm from, although we have an intertwined state and religion, not many people are actually religious. But what we do have is huge amounts of lack of skepticism, lack of critical thinking.
Yeah.
Virtually everybody I know believes in ghosts. I don't think I know a single person in Britain who doesn't believe in some form of something. That's I don't believe in God, but I do believe that there's something. And just coming out of religion in and of itself does not automatically mean that we've got a skeptical society and a society which is critical thinking. And I think when I see articles, every time I see this discussed on the non-profits, that's something that jumps out of me. The celebration of this seems to ignore that aspect of it. And I think that's something that's really, really important for us to acknowledge. I'm not saying it's a bad thing by any means that people are becoming more secular. It's a good thing. That's not my viewpoint. But I think we shouldn't celebrate prematurely that just because somebody is coming out of religion, that's going to solve all of the world's problems. Yeah. Kelley?
There is a companion article to this segment, and I found that to be really, really, really heartening. But first, before I go into that, I think you're right, Richard. And the population that Cynthia mentioned earlier, the nuns, the NONESs, that are on the rise in the USA, when they do that poll, the nuns are people who are not affiliated with the church or religion. Right. And there's a lot of people who would say, well, I believe in God, but I don't ever go to church. Right. Mm-hmm. And they would fall into that category. So when we say there's 29 or 36% of nuns in the United States, I don't know that those are actually all people who don't believe in the Christian God even.
Oh, no, they're not.
Right.
They're not.
Right. And I am always hesitant to think that we're winning that quickly, although we are winning. We're definitely winning. Mm-hmm. And this report in the second article mentions that they run through 4 different models, but through all the different models, that somewhere between the year 2050 and the year 2070, that the nuns will outnumber Christians in the United States.
Right.
And with that growing population also comes growing political power. Mm-hmm. So don't eat the good little atheist babies, right? Just leave those ones alone.
Right.
But that should give a lot of the people who are watching hope for the future, because this is well within your lifespans, right? And when you're an old person like I am now, you'll be able to control politics and actually make the changes that need to be made, instead of like doing what my generation has done and not making those changes.
Yeah.
So I really find that whole article really enlightening. Jason, you have something, or Cynthia, you have something else you wanted to say?
Well, I wanted to comment specifically about Richard making that whole statement about like still running into people in Britain that believe in ghosts. I mean, Britain is old as fuck. Come on, Richard. I mean, like, and it's so much fucking lore that is like attached to the fucking country. I mean, London alone is this foggy. You just think this walking around, all the foggy, it must contain not only evaporation or gases like, water that actually comes up because like, it's on the ocean, but shit, maybe there's ghosts just like hovering around here. I mean, like every 2 seconds, like Tower London, old. The Westminster old. You know, this
Let me just point out before you continue. Let me just point out before you continue that Britain is so old that we had Christians in Britain before the Bible was finished being written. That's how old we are.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just old as fuck. So like you can't necessarily, like escape any type of country in some type of ghost lore when you are old as fuck. Okay, come on, y'all. Don't you all still use like Roman built roads for Pete's sake? I mean, come on now.
This is true. This is true.
Okay, all right, cool. But when I was asking you specifically about Dr. Carmen Laststone, who's the moderator for the United Church, she is actually the first female Indigenous leader of the religious denomination in Canada, and she was mentioning, and I believe that we also talked about this in previous shows. A rising of people who happen to be irreligious and even going to agnosticism and atheism because of a lot of the scandals that happen in church. I mean, like if we're talking specifically about British Columbia and Canada, this is the hotbed of residential schools, and finding like thousands of graves of buried children that have been murdered, at the behest of the Catholic Church that actually had these residential schools specifically for the Indigenous community that was there. You're right. And it wasn't just in Canada that we had this issue. In the United States, they have also found they also have ran residential schools by the Catholic Church that had the same problem. It just was more prevalent in Canada, right? So we had that issue. And then also because of all the scandals, the sexual abuse scandals too, that have happened at the behest of not just the Catholic Church. We even covered the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yep.
And some other, and we even talked about like some other denominations of churches that have also did cover-ups when it comes to their bad behavior towards their but towards their parishioners. So I definitely would say that can be a contributing factor, like people who are just completely disenchanted with the church, saying that, hey, if God cannot keep a bit on your genitalia when it comes to abusing kids, then why the fuck would I actually worship him? So we're going to go ahead and like to scale back, like, you know what, I'm good. And I think that's definitely a contributing factor, but I don't necessarily just want to say that's the only thing, right? I think there's a lot of different things that are definitely happening, especially like when you're talking about Christian nationalism that's rising. Specifically, and I heard like one person calling Christian nationalism the religion of white supremacy, where like it's not necessarily about bringing a change that will be good for human beings. This is basically just a way for us to garner power because God said, right? And this is completely made up in their particular heads, and they actually use this as like a as a point for them to be able to move politically and socially and economically, right? And then of course all the other ills that have come with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of the church operating globally that has actually like harmed people. And then of course, like, gaining knowledge about how nature in of itself works, not necessarily pointing to any type of supernatural deity to say that this actually is a thing. So I mean, like, we have all these particular variables that are contributing to this, but I think that there is still some point of our own evolutionary wiring as human beings that actually leans to, if we don't necessarily have an explanation of the universe or something that hasn't been completely revealed in science, etc., we have a tendency to imbue the supernatural in it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, and I think there's one thing I wanted to hit upon that you brought up, and then I want to hit on something that Richard said. The first thing is something you brought up about the reason people leave church and identify as atheist and agnostic, and that's always difficult for me because I can understand leaving a church because an organization is just fucking terrible, but not believing because people were shitty. Like, to me, that doesn't seem like a reason to disbelieve. Like, people can still be shitty, but I like what Richard was saying. I kind of see what he's saying. Like, I don't want to be part of this, but that doesn't mean I still don't believe, right?
It's a reason to leave church, but not a reason to leave actual belief.
Faith. Yeah, not a reason to leave faith. Now, and to what Richard said is like, it's hard for me to get excited about people just leaving that. Well, my bias being here in Texas is that if somebody leaves church, there's a lot connected to that. Like, if somebody's no longer working in their church community, that means they've lost friends, they've probably lost work, they've lost a social network, and they're kind of starting from scratch. So I get extra fucking excited whenever I hear somebody's like, yeah, I'm not into that anymore. You know, okay, cool. You're not into that anymore. Cool. Get out of that shit. Come hang out with us. It's a lot safer, and nobody's going to try to, shoot you while you're standing in your yard. So I get excited due to my bias. And I think it's really good if you're part of a church community and it's really fucking you over and done some horrendous shit, that's a good reason to leave. But I still don't think that's a good reason to call yourself an atheist. You still need to go a little deeper before you consider yourself an atheist. Because if you're convinced on the grounds of other people doing things, then you're going to be convinced pretty easily back towards the other direction. Because that's not a really good reason to disbelieve. That's just my opinion. People could disagree with me, but that's how I feel. Okay. If I could, I'll just pass it to Kelley. I know Kelley wants to say something really quick, but thank you all.
I just wanted to point out that this is in British Columbia, and we do have some friends of the nonprofits in that area. Neil, the 604 Atheist, Nate Smith, Randolph Richardson, and I like to think that maybe that they helped to get those numbers up too. So shout out to them. That's all.
Definitely. Okay, now let's take a quick break in our conversation. If you didn't tune into the other ACA shows last week, here is what you missed.
It doesn't have to go super fast. It doesn't have to go super slow. It can go whatever pace that you want it to be, because you don't have to care about another person in the room. It's one of the best parts about masturbation is nobody else is there.
Yeah.
I can do whatever I want.
I feel like I'm going to put this on and I want to learn about QAnon. And why do I have this? I don't know. But teach me.
John just put on a cloud nose inexplicably. I think that's a QAnon is what I'm going to call that.
QAnon. Oh.
QAnon.
You don't have freedom from religion. Well, that's right, I don't have freedom from religion. But I still have the right to tell you to off if you're trying to impose it on me, and off if you're trying to impose it on my children. I still have that right.
This water has magic powers now. Does that mean that this water has magic powers just because I said it? Or do we need some other way of verification?
Yeah, well, you need to be a reliable source.
I'm a super reliable source.
Trustworthy.
I'm incredibly trustworthy.
The oceans and all of the rivers on Earth are supposed to turn into blood. Did we miss that?
It has happened. It is happening in China. It's happening in India.
The ocean is turning to blood in China and India? What are you talking about?
If you can arrange to be in the Austin area, and if you can be in the Austin and the Austin area between November 17th and 20th, consider joining us in the studio audience at the ACA Free Thought Library for live broadcasts of Secular Sexuality, Truth Wanted, Talk Heathen, and the Atheist Experience. Doors open at 6 p.m. on Thursday and Friday and noon on Sunday. Parking is where you can find a legal spot. Keep it legal, folks. After the lot is full. If you can't make it there this month, we will be continuing to broadcast live from the library the last week of each month. So keep watching this show and our website, atheist-community.org, for news and information as we expand into our studio offerings into the near future. So we're going to go into segment 3, and our friend Cynthia McDonald is going to take us in.
Awesome. So, this particular article that we're going to be discussing is entitled Humanist Women of Color Gather. It was actually written in The Humanist by Anna Clay and published on October 6, 2022. And this actually was a synopsis of the Women of Color Beyond Belief conference that happened in my city, Chicago, Illinois, actually put on by the Black Non-Believers, the Black Skeptic Group, and the organizers and founders were Bridget Bria Crutchfield, Dr. Sakibu Hutchinson, and friend of the show, Mandisa Thomas, the founder and also the current president of the Black Non-Believers. So, in this particular article, it mostly just discussed like some of the highlights of the conference. Actually mentioned like some of the different segments that actually was going on. The theme of this particular year's conference was called Hands Off Our Bodies, which is a proclamation, a demand, and a movement that is of the utmost importance in the wake of the SCOTUS overturning of Roe v. Wade decision that actually negatively impacts Black women, Indigenous women, and other women from marginalized communities, and at disproportionate rates. So a lot of the particular panel discussions and also speeches that were presented were around that particular theme in some shape, way, or form. So I am going to go ahead and pass it on to Kelley, who I know that you had like a few questions, preguntas rather, concerning the conference.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of information in there, but I know that you served on one of the panels there, did you not?
I did. I was a panelist at the Women of Color Beyond Belief conference. I was actually on a panel with Mandisa Thomas and Jenna Mew, a fellow alumni of the nonprofits and the ACA Discord. So, and our particular panel was discussing women of color, Black women that happen to be in the atheist content podcast world, and some of the advantages and some of the barriers that we actually face as content creators. So we really got a chance to kind of like dig in a little bit, even though like our panel, I believe, was like only about an hour, including Q&A. About all the different things that we actually deal with creating content, especially when you're doing it from a non-belief perspective. I know that specifically one of the things that I brought up is just like the whole notion about being heard. Like, especially as we can all tell that I am the resident woman of color, Black woman on this whole panel of two bald white guys and one white guy with long hair. So, which, as we can, say, especially when it comes to atheist content, like a lot of times it is largely white cisgender heterosexual men, cishet men, right? So try to like, kind of like get through that and actually say like, hey, we have a perspective when it comes to atheists, and we also have a perspective when it comes to being atheists from our particular communities, which can be very different in some cases from the communities that happen to be present in this particular time.
Yeah, Kelley, any more specific questions?
I wanted to say that I kind of envy you getting to hang out with Jenna Miu. I haven't talked to her in a long time, and she used to do another podcast called If Was, and that's kind of where I started out doing this whole internet thing. So it's all her fault, and I really miss her a lot. So
I remember. I remember a while ago. I mean, it's going on over a year ago now. It's maybe even like closer to 2 years when things have come on a long way from in the women of color atheist movement, and it's thanks to people like Cynthia and Mandisa and Jenna who as to why that's happening. And it's great to me to see these conferences go. And like I said, I remember almost a couple of years ago when Jenna and Cynthia did a video, and I ended up in an argument in the comments. I don't know if you remember this, Cynthia, and because someone was basically saying, why do black women need a voice? And it's very rare I get into YouTube comment arguments, but this was an occasion where I really, really got fired up. This is something that is not only welcome, but is vitally, vitally needed. And I, for one, am loving seeing this grow every year when I see this conference, advertised, and I see the speakers there and the range of topics. It really, really excites me that this is happening and this is growing. And let's have more of it, Jason.
Yeah.
Well, the thing, Cynthia, that really stood out to me reading the article, and if you could talk about this, was the amount of intersectionality that I saw being represented there, especially with queer folk, with different people who more or less experience the damage that you get from misogynistic, patriarchal, cis, het, white male culture. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I found like was so dope about this particular conference is that we had presenters who were not only like, from their perspective communities, whether they were Black, whether they were Latina, whether they were indigenous, whether they were Indian, East Indian, and had all types of different representations from these particular groups of people. But we also saw like very much so a representation of queer people as well.
Yeah.
Specifically, Deanna Williams, who I got a chance to meet at the conference, is a filmmaker. She presented her film called Tracks. I even bought it. It's available on DVD and also streaming, people. So make sure you go ahead and get it. But that really just talks about like her experiences in a comical way about being a queer person who happens to also be Black, and how that even shows up in her particular community, and and also even Candace Gorham, who also talked about death and dying and disbelief, and how that even intersects in that particular way, who also is a queer woman, queer Black woman. And especially I think that like when we're having these particular conversations about community alone, we have a tendency to kind of like only emphasize like race and ethnicity, right?
Yeah.
Which is important. But the thing about it is that although like, yes, my race is Black, my ethnicity may be, African American, as far as like, descendant of chattel slavery, freedmen, as far as like a political status is concerned, I still have an intersection of like who I am as an individual. It's not just, it doesn't just stop there.
Exactly.
I am an atheist. I am a guardian. I have a child. I'm also an ally of the LGBTQ plus community. I work with people in healthcare. I'm an advocate, so like all these different when it comes to identities converge to make a person. And I think that like sometimes that gets lost in the sauce. When we are actually talking about like what makes up a person, like, oh, I just see Black. Like, no, I'm much more than that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I fully agree. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
Kelley, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I do have one more question. I really thought this looked like a really interesting, insightful, really informative event, and I'd like to see in this happening, but I'd also like to see more things happening in Chicago, since there does seem to be this vibrant community down there. But Cynthia, you were able to attend this conference for the 3 years that it's been running. Have you seen a larger participation and more excitement over the event, about the event as time has gone on?
Well, I actually attended and participated in 2021 and 2022. So its first inception was in 2019. I believe that at the height of the pandemic, they had to do like a kibosh on it, and then came back in 2021. So I participated in the past 2 years of this particular conference, and I have seen growth. I have definitely seen more people that are interested, and especially bringing their perspectives to, really create community, which is really what Black non-believers is very much so about. A big part of their atheist activism and non-belief activism is actually creating a safe space for Black people and also allies who happen to be non-believers. Especially like, and Richard, shout out to you for, jumping in the comments when people are like, why do Black women who happen to be atheists need a voice? First off, my question is, really? Secondly, it's, this, our communities have been silenced for so long when it comes to a plethora of issues, right? But being able to have a platform to not only talk about some of the work that we do, talk about our activism, because like that's one of the things that I was able to do in 2021, talk about specifically the activism that I do about social and economic justice, specifically around reparations. But and then coming back to talk about how I use media in order to like actually bolster that particular issue and other issues that like affect women, and Black women, and also other women who happen to be marginalized. That is a point to be able to give voice and also shine a light on these particular issues, because a lot of times they get blinded eyed, and that's why it's important to really be able to promote, support, and be able to be involved in this particular conference.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is really, really awesome. I think, like I said earlier, I think I've seen this grow. I've seen from the outside. I've seen this grow, and it's something I've had my eye on for a couple of years since, my friends Jenna and Cynthia have been involved, and I like to keep a close beady eye on what they're doing. Not a creepy beady eye, just
no, just all y'all just need to come to Chicago and quit playing, and then you all have to indulge in Chicago style pizza so we can tell Mandisa to shut up, because we've been fighting for the past 2 years over New York style Chicago style pizza. Yes, I'm gunning for you, Mandisa. I love you, but you're wrong.
Yeah, you touched on something very important earlier, Cynthia, and that was, and one of the reasons why I kind of got into that argument I did all that time ago is that because this isn't, it's very easy just to see this as a Black woman thing,
right?
And it's not, because
no.
there's so much intersection in that community itself. It's women of color aren't just Black women. There are other people in there as well, like you said, with the Native American women and people like that, and people who are queer. We've got to represent that, give them their voices, because they're marginalized. They're marginalized within a marginalized community.
Right.
And this is why it's so important to have these events, so that everybody has a fair crack at the whip when they get their voice going. Kelley.
I was just going to say there's 3 levels of marginalization there, right?
Yeah, it's race, it's
right.
it's gender, and
right,
also
race, gender, and atheism.
And
right? So
atheism,
there's 3 levels of marginalization.
Add sexual preference into the mix,
and also and sexual preference, and not just sexual preference, but it also comes with gender identification,
identity.
as well.
Yes, of course. I mean, 5 things, and then socioeconomic status. There's so many things you can throw in the mix, and I really think it's beautiful that you brought up, Cynthia, how you've got 2 shaved head white guys right here, and on the other side, long haired white guy. But you see, there's an intersection here. It's because of the atheism and because of the skepticism. So I mean, we're all in the same boat together. We need to keep it going.
Yeah, and we can, and I just want to just bring up this one more thing, and we can definitely move on. Is that it's so important to have these particular spaces, because there's going to be something that's very much so indicative to your community alone, especially when we're talking about like that ethnocentric portion of it. We need our spaces. We do need spaces for us to identify, grow, and becoming a whole person, right? But we can still be able to coalesce with one another, as far as like bringing together issues that all of us can actually say that concern us. Like we all are concerned about the blurring of religion and government. We are also concerned about government in of itself dictating bodily autonomy, because it's not just reproductive rights. It's really also about what the government can say can and cannot happen with your body without your consent. And it's also about being able to be a non-believer without necessarily getting the backlash of what comes with that. And especially like, and I can speak specifically in the Black community, because I brought this up so many times, that being Christian and being Black are almost synonymous.
Oh yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, so it's so important to be able to have spaces to say, hey, I know this is who you are, but you can be a non-believer and it does not have to do anything, or it does not have to take away from your identity as a person.
No,
Amen.
Very, very, very important message. And like I say, it's something I want to see more of and grow in the future. You can become a member of this channel for as little as 99 cents a month. Click the join button below the video. This will give you access to special chat emojis, which I'm hoping to see more of in the future. Just putting that out there, producers. Also, we have a brand new store. Visit tiny.cc/merchaca to get your favorite items like t-shirts, hoodies, and coffee mugs. You can check out our new items like beanies, phone cases, and tote bags. And I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what a tote bag is. All ACA shows feature a special limited edition item each month. So be sure to check out our non-profits merch store and merch from all the other shows. Okay, we're going to wrap it up with this fun little segment. And Kelley is going to take us in.
Stop.
I know we're all laughing.
I think you broke Cynthia.
We're going to laugh more too, I have a feeling. Our next little story is from Exemplar News. It was written by Cassandra Yorgi, and it is about a Bigfoot sighting in northern Michigan on an eagle nest observation cam. And the video is there. You can watch it. It's a Bigfoot video, so it's a bit grainy, but you can see a dark bipedal creature pass by through the upper part of the camera. Is it a Bigfoot? I don't know. I have many thoughts about it. What do you think, Richard? Do you think we're seeing a Bigfoot?
I thought this was hilarious. I like you. I like a little bit of cryptozoology of an evening to relax to. But look, this is so vague and entirely unimpressive. I was reading the comments on the video from both sides of the argument, and they didn't help. No. We had comments like, "It's too big to be a person." And there's literally no way of telling from the position of camera how big it is. Another one said it's too remote for it to be a person. And yet the people got there to put the camera there in the first place. So it's easily accessible to people, obviously. On the other side of the argument, we had it's a person in a ghillie suit and a monkey suit. They were the other suggestions we have. And let's be honest, it was so out of focus. It could be anything. I'm going to pass it to Cynthia Rose. She's just going to laugh us all to death.
I mean, first off, Kelley, I really wish that you were on Talk Heathen when I was in Austin. And that was the first question that we got. Which cryptid do you think actually could exist I think that Johnny and I both landed on something. I mentioned like the abominable snowman, like a Yeti, and then and then he landed on Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and I told him and to be honest with you, I did not base my answer on anything scientific whatsoever. I based it on, again, going back to science fiction lore that I have absorbed over the years. But then, but my thing is this, y'all, and I think that I think you guys can agree with me. Why is it that every time that somebody says that they have evidence for a cryptid, whether if it be the Yeti, whether if it be Sasquatch, whether it be ghosts, whether it be the Loch Ness monster, it's all grainy and blurry. And just like, what in the world is that? I don't know. What is that? I think that's a Bigfoot. Do you think that's a big? You can't get somebody up there with an eagle cam, so it must be a Bigfoot. And to the point, yo, it should be. Look, if this is Bigfoot, we should be like, God damn it, it's clear. It's crystal clear. I can see without a shadow of doubt that is something that is not human and is furry with big feet. Therefore, it should be that. I'm done. Jason.
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to hit on what y'all said about that eagle cam. Somebody went up there to get that eagle cam. Right. So if they saw this thing, let's say it's within a month of it, you go up there and you see where it was walking. You see the angle. You look for some little hairs. You look for tracks. If that thing's there and it's a bipedal primate-esque hominoid type thing, that thing's not sprinting 1,000 miles an hour. It's not a cheetah. It's not like doing time travel to different universes to test out different nuts and berries.
You sure? Maybe it is time traveling, Jason. I'm just saying.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, no, don't start. No, we'll talk after. Look, here's the thing. And it's not there by itself. It's not 2,000 years old. It's not the second coming. There's got to be a family, unless that thing's like the Highlander primate or something. I don't know. It just lives forever and doesn't have any other like cryptids to slaughter. It's killed all the other ones with its like cryptid sword or something. I mean, I don't know. So just like I think my daughter and I could go up there and dig around and possibly find some turds or something, and then like follow a trail of turds, and then there it is. So I think like basic. I think I broke Cynthia. Basic Girl Scout turd discovery could find that thing. I don't know. That's all I've got. I can't.
Yeah, Kelley, take us out before Cynthia kills the production.
Yeah, right. I have so many things I want to say about this. Does everybody know about the Mormon Bigfoot connection?
What?
Oh, no.
No, there's a church. Wait. There's a Church of Latter-day Saints.
Yes,
connection to Bigfoot. Please do tell.
A Mormon apostle back in 1835 wrote down in his journal about walking with a large hairy creature. He was riding a mule, and the head of the creature was on level with his own, and they had a conversation as they rode on down the road, and the creature told him that he was Cain, and he had been covered with hair and turned into a monster by God and sentenced to wander the world forever.
I cannot.
So now Mormons actually, and this story was related in a book in 1969, and it kind of became like underground Mormon lore.
Oh, God.
So that they all think that all Bigfoots are Cain. And it's crazy, but it's true. It's a true thing.
And that is not the craziest Mormon claim either. Which is the best part about it.
Is this Cain from the Legend of Kung Fu that we're talking about? Or I mean, which Cain are
like
a traveling hairy samurai? He's a traveling hairy samurai.
I'm going to wrap it up before Cynthia dies on us. I think we need a bit of calm in the room. Join our social fan media outlets. You can find most of the non-profit hosts on the atheist community of Discord by going to tiny.cc/ACD Discord and on Facebook at tiny.cc/FBNP. If you would like to support the show, you can do so by becoming a patron at Patreon. I forgot the address. Patreon. That's Cynthia's fault. I'm totally blaming Cynthia. Patreon, tiny.cc/PatreonNP. If you find yourself already shopping at Amazon, support the atheist community of Austin by shopping at smile.amazon.com and selecting the atheist community of Austin as the beneficiary. Be sure to use that link to help out the ACA. We really, really do appreciate it. And if you want to see Cynthia laughing much, much more, which we all do, please help donate. We value your feedback. Tell us what you like, Cynthia, and what you don't like in the comments. Also, Cynthia, in the comments, or email us at nonprofit@atheist-community.org. Also visit the Atheist Community of Austin's official website at atheist-community.org on the latest of what's happening, and feel free to contact the ACA at tv@atheist-community.org. Right, very quickly, we're going to go into some final thoughts. We'll leave Cynthia to the end just to give her time to compose herself. Jason.
Look, I just need to find a team to go help me find Bigfoot turds, and I'll be set. That's all I really care about at this moment. I want to go to that eagle's nest. I want to sniff out some Bigfoot turds, and I'm going to bring them to the Mormons, and maybe they'll give me part of their storehouse. That's about all I got. Thanks for having me, y'all.
Kelley.
Quick thought. I do live in northern Michigan where the Bigfoot lives, and it is turkey. It was turkey hunting season, and most turkey hunters, when they go out in the field, wear ghillie suits. So I'm pretty sure it was a turkey hunter in a ghillie suit.
Yeah,
I was happy to be here too. It was really fun working with you, Richard and Jason. It was great working with you, and Cynthia, I hope you get better.
Yeah, we have had a great show with a variety of subjects, which have all been really, really important. I'm going to attempt to give Cynthia a final thought, if she can hold herself together long enough to say something. Cynthia.
My face hurts.
And on that note, thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.